So today we're talking about the second part 2 of codependency. If you didn't get a chance to catch part 1, then I hope that you will. Again, I don't know if when this started recording. It looked like it was recording. I said I'm Stacy Renee. I'm a mindset coach. Life on life's terms, because life is life, and so I'm that kind of coach too. Not that they're different, they're the same. Because we're changing our mind. We're never too old, and it's never too late to change our mind, to live the life that we were meant to live. You were born to live, darling. So we're talking about that. Sometimes what this channel does is I get on here to try to help you understand, if you don't already, just like I had to learn that, I wasn't born stupid. I'm not stupid. I'm not lazy. And the reality is that I am enough, and I'm not too much. Although if I get called too much, I might be too much for some people. And that's, being able to learn acceptance of who I am. And in codependency, acceptance plays a great deal. Hey, Card Rock, good morning. How are you today? So I'm going to talk about codependency today. I talked about codependency Monday night, and so I'm going to talk about that a little bit deeper today, go into it some more for those who aren't sure what codependency is. I know that when I was called codependent, I was called a codependent a couple of times before I was willing to accept my codependency. And until I went to therapy, and she's like, Stacy, you need to go to CODA. She was pretty insistent, because I like to do things my way first before I'm willing to see things another way. My humanness is I think that I know things sometimes that I don't know. And what I had to learn in my own humanness is that's really an arrogance. I think we've all got a little arrogance in us. And the thing is when we grow to understand these polarities, and we can find harmony in between. The other side of arrogance is humility. And in my codependency, I could call myself having humility because I certainly, felt like I was humiliated because I would do things and then it just didn't turn out the way that I wanted. And I didn't realize that the way that I wanted was sometimes manipulation. I didn't see my own manipulation. Yay, I'm glad. I'm glad you got a day off today. Days off are amazing. After this, I pretty much have the day off. I'll work on marketing and work on my Unbound Self workshop that I have coming up. Good morning, MR Special Forces. It's good to see you this morning. Well, I bet you like to manipulate too. Most of us do in our humanness, is that we tend to manipulate, but none of us want to own that. In my codependency, I certainly did not want to own that or see that. But if I wanted to get better and not be a doormat, I had to own and see that. So oftentimes, that's why people would tell me about, Stacy, you're codependent, that couple of times. But they would tell me, stop being a doormat. And the thing was I was trying to manipulate the way that people see me. I wanted to make sure that people saw me as good, and so I would try to be good because I learned early on that being good would not get me in trouble, right? So I would just be good. But then later I felt like being good didn't get me noticed. So later I did get in trouble. So as a coach, mindset coach, life coach, as I work with addiction recovery, codependency, and grief are my specialties. I am working with couples because I really work with people to see themselves as they are and not who they're, not through the other people's eyes. Good morning, darling Dane. How are you today? I'm glad that I can see you. So we're talking about codependency today and what it actually is and what it actually isn't. I want to thank you all for being here today, and thank you all who have subbed to this channel. That means a lot to me because you chose to be here. You chose to feed this algorithm. And I appreciate you feeding an algorithm that hopefully will help you. I have learned too to feed these algorithms that are going to empower me rather than break me down. And so channel is really about getting to know ourselves, and our souls so that we can grow, because there's not a plateau. It's not the only if disease. Once I get here, then, everything's going to be fine, because life is an adventure. Okay. So it's about getting in your own mind instead of trying to anticipate and strategize the needs of others and that acceptance of it. My bird is like back here. He went in his house because I have the air conditioning on and he's not as comfortable with the air conditioning on. Hi, David George. So what codependency is and isn't, I've got my notes here so I can see your comments there too. And I am able to be mindful of your time. And I'm so glad that Hard Rock, you have the day off. So let's get it started. So now that you've started recognize codependency, maybe someone has called you codependent. And I know if you're like me, you dismissed it because we think that that's an insult. And it can be if you want it to be. I don't label myself as codependent, but I did have some codependent behaviors. I learned those behaviors. The good news is that I could unlearn those behaviors. I've got my cough drop in my water because I've been talking a lot already this morning. Not here, but on another platform. So let's clear something up about codependency, because a lot of people think that when you get called codependent, that means you depend on people. And without clearly understanding that, our dependency on people is we may feel like that people depend on us, so that's why we might dismiss that, understandably. Stacy Renee. It's Stacy for the most part. Thank you, Halshborn, for asking. But I go by Stacy Renee. So a lot of people misunderstand what codependency actually is. Codependency is it's not just being nice. It's not just being supportive or caring about others or being a good parent, good friend, or a good partner. That's not the problem, because we are good. The thing is when we don't accept ourselves. Yes, I'm real, Sinjez. I met some of the people that I work with on a platform one day in Cozumel, because I'm down here near Cancun, Mexico. And some of the people that I work with took a cruise and went to Cozumel. And when I met them, they're like, oh my gosh, you're real. Because I am as real as I can get. I had to learn to feel comfortable in my own skin. And that's what I'm here to help people to do, because in a world that wants to tell you what to do, and a lot of us have learned to live in that world that tells us what to do, and we end up confused and second guessing and not even seeing ourselves clearly through our own eyes. We instead believe other people's lies and think that that's trickery. But how to feel comfortable in our own skin, where we feel clear and we feel grounded, to go within, to ask ourselves. Many times we're trying to predict what something's going on with somebody else without knowing, and that's our own unhealed wounds, wanting to protect others. But sometimes we're sacrificing ourselves, and that might have been a learned behavior to help others. And the thing is we can't give. We hear these sayings that can be contradictory. We can't give from an empty cup, and that's really true. So I know that in my codependency and in working with people with a lot of codependency is that they are afraid of saying no, right? That's one of the fears. Being dependent on yourself and learning to love and work on yourself before others is a different type of energy when you learn to. Yes, exactly, Dane. It's freedom, right? Because when we're trying to take responsibility for everybody else and not caring about ourselves, that sacrifice I'm talking about, there's not freedom in that. We are imprisoning ourselves, and it's, trying. We may say, I'm trying. This is a common language in codependency, is I'm trying. And, I don't feel comfortable saying no. And so, all right. Now, so, being able to help people to learn how to say no. So you can say yes to yourself. If you want your yeses to mean anything, you've got to learn to say no, or people will make you a doormat. In particular, the limited strength of the supporting evidence compared to well, Sankey, okay. Have you ever worked on codependency? Because I'm talking from experience. I'm not ChatGPT in this stuff on codependency. I have some notes, and I do use ChatGPT, But I'm talking about codependency from experience. So I don't think that anyone who's dealt with codependency could certainly criticize someone talking about codependency if you haven't dealt with it. All right. Where are these people coming from? Why do y'all want to be mean? Because you don't even know me and I don't know you, so I'm not going to be mean to you in return. Now, I'm not going to let nonsense distract people who are watching this morning. Thank you so much, Dane. I appreciate that because I don't know where these people are coming from that's trying to be mean to me and stuff this morning. I just don't know. But I'm going to keep going because codependency is about giving your power away to other people. And once we learn not to give our power away, we will feel empowered when we learn what's real. You know, I talk to people because I work with people in addiction, recovery, codependency, and grief. And I was talking to people about seeing ourselves through our own eyes. This is something that's part of the freedom, right, Dane? When we get to be free of codependency, is quit telling ourselves lies because of the eyes of other people. You know, because a lot of times we hang out with what feels comfortable, what feels familiar. And if we don't know ourselves, we may be accepting and hanging out with people who don't know themselves either. And I'm not saying not to accept people, but I'm not saying to take their opinions as your own. Thank you, darling. That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking. And you know, I don't believe in bullying people, and so they can come at me with this kind of stuff, but I'll eventually either put them in timeout if they distract me a bit, or distract y'all, because really I can probably ignore them better than most, you know, better than a lot of people. I know some of the people who follow me do not. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. And Dane, always, you know, so the thing is not giving power away to people, because some people are trying, they're committed to misunderstanding you. They're committed to arguing with you. And so let them and let me, you know, from the Mel Robbins thing, let them and let me. And I love that, you know, is that haters gonna hate, aren't they, Dane? Thank you so much. I appreciate you, Dane. I appreciate all of you for being here this morning who are listening and everything, trying to just, you know, feed an algorithm that's not going to be negative, that's not going to be hateful. So, and where we can learn about each other and ourselves, because I still get to learn from you all on here too. So thank you. So codependency is not just being nice, being supportive, caring about others, and being a good partner, friend, parent, all of this, because sometimes we title ourselves these things. Oh, for example, of a human. It is not about religion. It is not about politics. And it's certainly, we don't talk about my age. Those are the guidelines here. Those are the only guidelines. Now, I am a spiritual person, and sometimes I talk about my spirituality, but I do not try to tell people what they need to be in some of the comments here. This is part of the reason I don't address those comments. Thank you, David George. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Because that's why I'm here, is for you all. And so that's why I don't give other people power. I always thought the purpose of the internet was for communication and for education and reaching out to one another. Yes. Yes, exactly. Poor example of a human. So you're in the right place, of human. You are in the right place, because that's what this is about, is for us to love and support each other here and to learn, you know, to learn things, education, because we're never too old and it's never too late. And there's so much hatefulness in this world today that, you know, people can scroll there. That's why it means so much to me for you to subscribe, like, and to feed this algorithm, because that is not what this algorithm is about. So, Dane, darling, yes, it connects people like me and you. It does. It does. I'm so glad you found my channel too, because I love connecting with you. There are so many, you and so many people here that do want to, make good conversation. We have good conversation on here. We don't hate here. That's right, SKJ. We do not hate here. There's enough hate in the world, and you can find it. So I appreciate you feeding this algorithm. Yes, thank you, SKJ. I want to thank you all for subscribing. Dane, darling, did you see I have 1,000 now? This means that you all chose to come here. And I don't just do this for the money because I don't get money. I'm not monetized. I'm actually a mindset coach, and that's how I get paid. So if you need a mindset coach, then feel free. But I come on here because not everybody can afford a mindset coach. And some people may be sitting alone. And if I can help one person, that's my intention today, is if I can help one person, sometimes I get lucky and help more than one. But then no, I'm not a therapist. I'm a coach, Halborn. I'm a coach. I've had plenty of therapy and paid for plenty of therapy, and I share that with you all here too. Thank you, Dane, darling. I know, right? Because you've been with me a large part of the way, so thank you. Whoever subscribes today or whoever has subscribed in the past, but I thank you all who return and come back, and find this material that I cover valuable. Thank you. So I'm chewing on a cough drop. Thank you, darling. Thank you, Dane, darling. So codependency is when your sense of self-worth, your identity, and your emotional stability becomes dependent on somebody else. See, this is when adults are afraid of other adults, typically. When you think, I have to ask somebody to, if I can do this, or I have to ask, there are grown people feeling like they have to ask somebody. I'm not saying not consult your partner. You do need to consult, but you don't need to be afraid. And some decisions, you can make choices, more so choices. A decision, yes, consult with your partner, but a choice, your daily choices. One of my friends, we went to coffee one time. Thank you, darling. I coach people on life's choices and advise feelings and decisions. Thank you. Just suggestions. That's right. Thank you so much. Dane isn't yelling. He's just got the caps on, but it doesn't mean he's yelling. Dane, that's what I love about the people here, is that I won't be bothered by people sometimes, but they like to speak up because, yeah, sometimes people aren't, men and women are different, and it is beautiful. It is. Thank you. All right. Y'all are amazing. Thank you so much for being here. So codependency, like I said, it affects your sense of worth, your identity, and your emotional stability, because we're trying to anticipate other people's needs and strategize other people's needs. Good morning, Arian Khan. And that's only where we're dependent on somebody else. A lot of times we're supporting other people, but not getting support ourselves. And we may have a longing to get support. I know I did. I longed. So I would be giving it away, but not receiving, you see. And if I did receive, I would question it and I would feel guilty. So codependency goes very deep into guilt, unearned guilt. And sometimes we have unearned guilt based on, our upbringing. If your parent came home and was in a bad mood and you got in trouble just for being a kid, that's some unearned guilt you might have taken on. This is where we learn to walk on eggshells and learn to try to be good so that people will like us. I'm so sorry it's not a good morning to Florida is live. I know there's a lot of crazy weather going around the United States. And so my thoughts and prayers are with all those affected. I am from Fort Worth, Texas, and it did affect some surrounding areas of Fort Worth. It didn't affect where I'm at there when I'm there, but it did affect some surrounding areas. There's some crazy stuff. You're right, Dane, darling. It's noticing the patterns and not reacting on them. We don't talk about politics, religion, or my age on this channel, but I hope that you find something out of this on here. Love from, yes, thank you, Dane. All right. So I'm going to look at my notes now. Instead of asking, we're always trying to figure out, are they mad at me if they don't speak to me, right? That's part of codependency, is sometimes we just think somebody's mad at us, even if we don't even question, have I done anything wrong? We don't even question that sometimes. Our automatic, that's part of your autonomic chain in your ganglia chain, and part of these neural pathways in the programming is to start anticipating and strategizing. We don't even know. We're not even living in our body. Our mind is working there because that was programmed into us when we were children. And to deny and say that we didn't get programming. They tell us in the programs on TV, we're programmed. Good morning, hard to please guy. I haven't seen you in a while. Confucius say, walk on eggshells makes dirty omelet. I could see that. Howard Born. Oh, you're from Florida. I always wanted to visit Miami and go see the Dexter apartment. I'm not from Florida. I'm from Texas, but somebody here is from Florida. It was life in Florida, right? Let me go back and look. Hi, Sky King. That you must not be talking. Florida is life. It's from Florida, and there is some crazy weather going on in the United States. So my thoughts and prayers are that way. So instead of asking, what do I feel? What do I need? And what's true for me? We ask instead, just like I just said, are they okay with me? Did I do something wrong? What do I need to do to keep this connection going? What do I need to fix? What do I need to rescue? Because that's the sign of codependency, is we are fixers and we are rescuers. You know what that means, though? You are totally capable and competent. See, when we can realize what are we doing, then we can realize our gifts. You see, we get to turn our survival skills into tangible tools. Okay? But we have to recognize, and unless we can recognize the negative part of ourselves that has us wanting, longing, and left in pain, then can we realize the positive side that's competent and capable. Because you have proved you're competent and capable. And this is the thing, is sometimes when working with people, they're trying to prove their low self-esteem and don't even know it. They do. Excuse me. Sometimes we're so busy looking at how other people feel that we don't even know how we feel. Or we're trying to heal other people from our own pain when we're afraid to tell them no. And I'm not saying you tell everybody no, but some of the same people have the same problems and they just keep doing the same thing. And so we're teaching them, that how to treat us. I had to learn that I was teaching people how to treat me, that I was teaching people that I was a doormat. I was teaching people that I would always say yes and that they could depend on me. Codependency. They could depend on me. See, some people don't know your value if you don't know your value. And sometimes when you value yourself, you're not there for everybody else. Sometimes you need to show up for yourself because you are worthy, valuable, and divine, and you don't have to prove that to anybody. You were born that way. We just forget sometimes. Good morning, JJ Kohes and Mr. Samanvir. So what it feels like when we're codependent, if we are able, thank you, Simply Blessed, if we're able to get in touch with our feelings, is it feels like we're walking on eggshells, that we're overthinking interactions. We're already anticipating, right? I'm going to say this, they're going to say this, and then I'm going to say this, and then they're going to say this, and we get we wear ourselves out. And then sometimes we think, I should have done this and I should have done that. So we replay conversations. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Samanvir. So we'll replay these conversations, and we'll think, I should have. And the first thing I learned in therapy, y'all, was not to should on myself. Because maybe we grew up in an atmosphere where that was very much like the dialogue. When we're getting earned guilt and unearned guilt, it's like, you should have done this, you should have done that. And part of codependency is never feeling like we do enough. I am in Mexico, so you can tell I kind of got a Texas accent on top of the Mexico pronunciation, but I'm trying to pronounce better because I'm not so great in my Mexican pronunciation, So it can feel like we're walking on eggshells. It can feel like we're overthinking interactions and replaying conversations and feeling responsible about how other people feel, but not really in touch with our own feelings. Sometimes a lot of people call it empathy, and it's codependence. I'm not saying that people aren't empathetic, because people are empathetic. But a lot of times empathy and codependence get skewed because sometimes we're feeling our own feelings through somebody else and we don't realize it. That's why this feels familiar. We want to be with what feels familiar, and this feels familiar. People who haven't healed their feelings, and for us to want to heal their feelings because our feelings haven't been healed yet. So this will feel familiar, and this is why we attract to each other, is because we may be a little bit closer to healing our feelings, because healing is a journey. It's not a destination. So we try to start helping others heal their feelings without healing our own. So this is why one of the reasons that my therapist knew I was codependent is when you ask somebody, and when I know how I know somebody's codependent is when I ask somebody, how are you feeling? And they tell me what somebody else is doing or how somebody else is feeling instead of how they're feeling. This means we're not in touch with our emotions when we don't answer for ourselves. So, that's feeling responsible for other people's feelings. When you don't honor yourself and you say yes, but you really don't want to, and you say yes, then you're not honoring yourself. And then you're not going to feel honored by somebody else because honor was not the intention set there. But we aren't taught that. So I'm not trying to say I had to learn this. I wasn't taught that either. I wanted other people to heal me and me to heal other people. That's really what I thought and I knew. And that's what I thought was going to happen. But I don't know about you, but it's not what happened for me. So now I'm one check. I am talking about codependency, what it is and what it is not. Mr. Samavir, your dream country, Mexico, and your favorite actor is from Mexico too. Awesome. Who's your favorite actor? It was one of my dreams, and it's like returning to that childlike self. When I was a little girl and I would go to Six Flags, Mexico was my favorite country. Although when we did those things with your, that paper, when you did the paper like that, I would like think some of these comments. I'm sorry, I get distracted. That's why I have notes. But when we did that paper like that, I used to say Hawaii. And I was thinking about that this morning because as an adult now, I don't want to live on an island. No, I don't want to live on an island now. But it's a beautiful island. I did get to go to Hawaii. But Mexico is amazing. Mexico, I tell my family and friends, Mexico's like Hawaii, but it's cheaper because Hawaii is expensive. So anyway, as a coach, this is what I do is I help people make their dreams come true. I call my coach my fairy goddess mother because I never dreamed that I would get to fulfill my dreams, that I would get to return to that childlike state, this adventure. And this is what children do. And that's what, when we heal ourselves, we get to get that stuff off of our soul. Because like I said, you were born worthy. We weren't born thinking, oh, I'm overweight or, oh, I'm stupid. We weren't born thinking that way. This the programming. And as I've said, the programming could be the parents, it could be religion, it could be, the TV, because TV tells you it's programming. And I don't know that we ever escape the programming, but what we do is we get the choice and the chance to choose our program. What do I want? Because what you want is important. And that's what my therapist, my coach kept asking me is, what do you want? And then the thing was then I had to do actions towards getting what I want. Because I would say, I want security, because I wanted these kind of things. I want security. And she would call me out. And I, used to, before I got into coaching or therapy, before I had one of those, I was so afraid of looking stupid. I was afraid for somebody to disagree with me. And they couldn't really be my friends anymore if they disagreed with me back in the day when I was young and full of it. You couldn't disagree with me and still be my friend, because I didn't know the harmony in between. I didn't know myself. And so it caused me to question myself. But the real deal was I questioned myself before it caused me to question myself. I didn't know how to challenge myself, was all in my thoughts to ask another question. So I had to be questioned to learn how to ask myself those questions, valid questions. Because in codependency, part of what creates that is if you grew up in an atmosphere, had a partner that when they asked you something, and it also goes back to this earned and unearned guilt, and they ask you something, and if you didn't even get to answer before they told you what you thought and how you felt, that's part of it. Because sometimes that tells us we don't know what we think and how we feel. So we may answer, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know is not all bad. See, everything's good until it's not, and it's bad until it's not. And this is what evolution is. And that's life on life's terms. That's why I always say life on life's terms, because that's part of evolution. It's part of evolving. Some things are good things. Sometimes things will be hard to do until they're not. And then we have that sense of accomplishment. If we're doing it with the right intentions and motivations inside of ourselves and our true desires, we're going to feel accomplished. But if we're doing it for somebody else, we're not going to feel accomplished, not truly. We'll continue to second guess ourselves. That's what I had to learn. We're not insecure by nature, but because we were conditioned to locate our safety outside of ourselves, right? That's part of that only if disease. So like I said, I work with addiction, and addiction to food, addiction to drugs, alcohol, addiction to shopping. There can even be addiction to scrolling, catastrophizing, chaos. There's love addiction. There's all kinds of addictions, and there is transference of addiction. So oftentimes when we feel like that's the only if disease, part of that is that we feel like, oh, once I quit drinking, if you're like me, then I'm going to be so smart and I'm going to be so pretty and I'm going to know things that I never saw modeled for me, that I'm going to know things that I never did before. I didn't know a healthy relationship. I did not grow up with healthy relationships being modeled to me. So therefore, I did not know those things. And that's why I had to learn about codependency, because I chose codependent relationships because the comfortability and knowing people that were struggling like me that didn't know how to get out of the struggle. So until I sought outside help, did I learn what this was, and that it didn't identify who I am. None of these things, being a doormat doesn't identify who I am. I can change that. I can change things. So that's not an identity. So codependency is not loving deeply. A lot of times we put ourselves up on the chopping board because I'm in love. We're not, if we can't love ourselves, are we? If we're subjecting ourselves to these things, why are we doing this? And a lot of times we'll never ask that. And if you're comfortable with that, then, I'm not telling you not to. Being generous. A lot of times, in codependency, we give, and give, sometimes to the same people over and over and over, because it's that little group, that little ball that we feel comfortable in. Because when I was in my codependency, I didn't feel comfortable around people with a good self-esteem. My coach had to teach me how to claim my own self-esteem. I had to learn through looking at those codependent traits on what is really self-esteem and what is not. Because until then, I second guess myself. So we think that codependency is not loving deeply, being generous, having empathy, and wanting connection. The difference is this: healthy connection allows for autonomy. You get to be you. How many of us want to be loved for ourselves, but we don't know who our self is? Who is myself? I'm this person's mother. I'm this person's wife or husband. I'm this person's... Hi, Brian. Anaki Godoy. I don't know who that is. Well, God-man, thank you for asking that. God-man asks, how do we balance that? Because sometimes we need to make sacrifices for those we love. Do we have a resentment? When you sacrifice, if you have a resentment because you don't get back, are you sacrificing because you want to return? This is how you know how to balance that and how to ask ourselves, am I trying to manipulate? Am I wanting a return? This is why I mean intention and motivation is very important here, because a lot of people weren't programmed to understand intention and motivation. When we understand our own intentions and why we do what we do, because a lot of times do we ask people, ask ourselves, why did I do that? Why did I say yes when I didn't want to? Why did I do that? You know, it can also be with anxious attachment and avoidant attachment. Why did I do that? Why did I tell this person yes? And now I feel yucky. I feel shame-filled. I feel this way, you know? So are we sacrificing, putting ourselves on a slaughtering block, so to speak, feeling like somebody's taken away all of ourselves? Is that compromising ourselves? Compromising for women. Now, I'm not saying compromise can mean so many things for different people, but for women, compromising ourselves means saying yes when we mean no, you know? And so I always encourage people to learn to negotiate. So you're not sacrificing, that both parties are going to be satisfied. And when we learn to communicate, we can learn to negotiate and we won't sacrifice as much, because sometimes sacrifice has an underlying expectation. And we may not even know that we're doing that for expectation. I didn't know until I worked on my own codependency that I had these expectations. And I didn't understand these expectations. And I had a sponsor with codependency because I've got the book here. I worked the 12 steps, Codependence Guide to the 12 Steps. And I had to learn about what expectations were, because I sacrificed myself a lot, and I would give away money I didn't have, hoping that I returned it. I would give away this, I would give away that, because I was trying to prove my worth through giving things away. You see, that's not true generosity. That's not. So when you look at intention and motivation, am I doing it because I want to be generous, or am I, we don't know. So this is the autonomic and automatic chain that I'm talking about that goes to the brain to the body. And knowing our intentions and motivations, our intentions come from our mind and our motivations is our body, right? And so knowing and getting that in alignment. When I say I want security, but I'm not making choices that are for a secure person, whether it be a job, whether it be a partner, whether it be, how I participate and show up every day in life as a secure person. Am I driving reckless? What am I doing? Am I making choices for the bad boys? Am I making, this kind of thing? And if I'm doing those things, then what I say and what I do are two different things, you see. And I had to learn that about myself. So healthy connection allows you to be who you are and not sacrifice who you are. I had to tell somebody in a relationship, I can't love you and love myself. I still love that person, but I am no contact with that person, because I know underneath all of that person is, that person has potential. That person does great things, but that person also hurts me when that person isn't feeling good about themselves. And so I don't deserve that. That's not the kind of sacrifice. But I know my dad used to tell me, I was taught that we had to sacrifice in love. He used to say he sacrificed. He would, guilt us about going to work and sacrificing for us. This is what I mean about earned guilt and, earned guilt. Earned guilt is when we gossip about somebody else. Earned guilt is when we, take something that was somebody else's. It's those kind of things. But unearned guilt is guilt where you feel like you're not performing up to somebody else's standards. It's not actually something you've done. So, and we get that, like I said, if a parent comes home from work and they transfer their anger to us, there's a transference of anger. And if they transfer their anger to us and we're just kids and we don't understand like what's going on. If you come home from school and the parents are fighting and you feel like it's your fault, or you're worried about what's going to happen when you come home and the parents are fighting, these kind of things. So in healthy relationships, you can disagree without fear, say no without guilt, and have your own thoughts, feelings, and boundaries. This is autonomy. A lot of us don't know that. I had heard all these words and I had these preconceived notions of what they were. But life on life's terms and all of this journey, this adventure of life helps me learn new words so I can have new experiences. Say no one, Chuck. I got limited capability to understand what you're saying. Can you speak very simple English? Well, I'm doing my best. Thank you, Simply Blessed. God man. And can you make, okay, that's not dealing with the subject. How boring is, I don't like talking about my feelings. Is there something wrong with me? Why don't you like talking about your feelings? A lot of people don't like talking about their feelings. A lot of the times I think that the fear of talking about feelings is the fear of looking weak. The fear of somebody hurting them even more. I think that's the reason a lot of us don't like to talk about our feelings. And what we do is we build a wall around us of false esteem, or at least I did, of false esteem. And what that meant was every time I'd been hurt before, I put a little brick on my wall that I'm not going to share this anymore. I was just thinking about that this morning, when I talk about our childlike state, and then how do we learn this programming of not feeling good enough, and I remember that I showed up when I was like, before I was like 10, 11, 12, 13, I had a tendency to just be like, blah. I mean, I had started shrinking slowly. But at 14, 13, 14 is when we really, 12, 13, 14, preteen and teen, that's when you start really getting into the bullying, or I did. Some people get bullied before that. I talked about that, earlier today on the Facebook page, is that some people were bullied at home and they didn't realize it, and it wasn't an intention that was set. Some people were put on diets. Some of the people that I work with were put on diets at 8 and 11 years old. They were sent to Weight Watchers and all of this. And so they learned something's wrong with me by doing that. Something's wrong with me. That if I just was skinny enough, I would be accepted. See, we didn't realize that. Our parents and their parents didn't have all the education we have today to explore things. So it's not to blame other people. You can't empower yourself by blaming other people. And the relationship may have healed before you lost that parent, like me and my dad. I shared that, we had a violent relationship sometimes when I was a teenager. And I was bullied at school when I was a teenager. There was a lot going on when I was a teenager, and I got tired of being good. So I started to be bad, So, because I didn't get recognition for being good. It seemed like the people who were being bad got more recognition. Anyway, back to the notes. Let me look at these comments. So I have made a mindset today too. Okay. Thank you, Kustubmohan. Mohan. I hope I'm saying that close to right. You can validate yourself. Yes, you can, immortal beloved, is that we have to recognize our feelings and heal them so we can validate ourselves. Because some of us were programmed to make everyone else happy and not take that look in ourselves. So sometimes that's why it's hard to feel our own feelings, but yet when we haven't felt our own feelings, that we can connect to people who are feeling some of the feelings, and we can have empathy to them, but it doesn't mean our own feelings are healed. Thank you so much, Gustav Mohan. My parrot is back in the back, Mr. Samanbird. Samanbird. It's cold because I turned the air conditioning on. Thank you, Nelson Motes. I'm not from Alabama. I'm from Texas. Fort Worth, Texas. Thank you. So, thank you, Mr. Simonbeard. Yeah, the parrot's back here. He went in his house. If I start tapping, the parrot will come out. So maybe we'll tap. Loving yourself is finding what matters to you. Yes. Thank you, Prajwal. I hope you subscribed. I want to thank all of you who have subscribed, because you chose to feed an algorithm where we're trying to grow. We're growing here. And so we're not feeding into the catastrophizing and all of these things, because I know the world can seem like a crazy place, but we get to live within our selves and our souls. So thank you. Well, that's the thing, is in Cap Captain USA. When you sacrifice, sometimes a little appreciation goes a long way. That's why sacrifice is so important to self-worth and causes we sacrifice for. And that in itself depends on what do you term sacrifice as. You know, is like I said, sometimes sacrifice can make us feel guilty or feel obligated, and guilt and obligation are definitely a sign of codependency. Is when we feel obligated. I have to do this because somebody did something for me. See, when we show up in our authenticity and our autonomy, we do things because we want to do it. When people don't question, I don't think with me, like because I have worked on my codependency. So if somebody asks me to do something, I don't want to do it. I say, no, thank you. You know, if they ask me to do something, I want to do it. They know that I want to do it. They don't say, oh, she's just doing that. You see, do any of y'all have that dialogue? If they're just doing that, they're just saying that. We're dismissing and discounting, dismissing and discarding compliments, or we're dismissing and discarding love and friendship and those things. This is what I mean by proving it to ourselves, is that sometimes people do want to show up for us. Sometimes people do appreciate us. But if we haven't learned to appreciate ourselves in our own time, then we won't think others appreciate it either. You know, I used to work with, in sponsees and work and things, and they could call me until a certain time unless their behind was falling off. And I have this boundary because I'm not trying to talk to people and chit chat after 8:30 p.m. my time. I like to really pay attention to what I'm putting into my mind, body, and soul before my rest. We don't watch violence. I'm not just chit chatting, getting into other people's business at that time. I'm just relaxing. And I mean truly relaxing, not just zoning out, relaxing. I do my prayers. I do my things that I do, and I don't want to be interrupted. So I'm looking at the comments. Emotional reaction is good, but sometimes people don't even know how to react or respond. Reaction, is it a reaction or a response? Because I like response. A reaction, and are we going to believe it? Simply blessed. Sorry to hear about your experience. That hurt badly when my parents weren't there. My mom had been institutionalized, and my stepdad dropped me and my brother off at my uncle's. Oh, I agree. Simply blessed and Captain USA. I bet that did. I bet you felt abandoned, right? But I hope you don't abandon yourself, because a lot of times when we feel abandoned, we abandon ourselves. And so that's why I'm here is, a lot of times people think that that's their identity, that that's their lot in their life. And maybe their health will struggle. They'll struggle with health or struggle with something else, because what mental and physicality go together a lot of times. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not saying all the time. I don't know that. But I know that for me, when I'm experiencing something that's not pleasing, that it can affect my body. I'm sure you're an amazing person, Captain USA, but don't forget to love yourself. All right, Sabab Singh, I don't know, you need to ask her. Okay. Captain USA, I'm glad that you found strength through it all. Yes, simply to Captain USA. Yes, simply broken homes have. Absolutely, Captain USA. Sometimes we learn to take our survival skills, because it's like surviving. Surviving is when we're going in that flight, fight, and freeze mode. And some of us don't know how to recognize those modes. That's your central nervous system and how it manifests in your body. We obviously know what fight is. And fight comes from defense, because maybe somebody felt like they had to defend themselves their whole life. So that's pretty obvious. We know what fight is that you're prepared for somebody to say something because you feel like maybe it always happened. And then freeze, we know what that is. And when we numb down, when we don't feel safe enough to say anything and we don't know how to feel or how to think. Freeze. But flight is like, people really don't know, I don't think, what flight is. Flight is this scrolling, when we're just like scrolling, saying, I'm trying to find something. and we're trying to escape outside of our head, trying to scroll, trying to find something outside of ourselves to make us feel better. So that's the flight, that distraction. Just gaming. I couldn't reach you, girl. Please type your Gmail. I don't know if I can type in here. No, I don't see how I can. I don't see how I can type it in here. Just gaming. It's in the description. So go to the description. Strudel Slayer. Okay. Does free will exist? Yes, it does. It's in our choices. Free will is in our choices. Thank you. Immortal beloved. Everything you're saying is contingent on having free will. Yes. Choices. Simply blessed. I hope that I find the strength to, like you did, but thank you for reminding me that there's strength on the other side. I love that when y'all are so supportive of each other on here. Thank you for doing that. Simply blessed. And Captain USA. Captain USA, thank you for sharing vulnerably. Because somebody said earlier that they didn't like to feel like to talk about their feelings. And this is why, is we're afraid of that vulnerability, but we can't heal without the vulnerability. Can we be vulnerable for everybody? No, because not everybody has your best interest. That's why it does my heart good when I see Simply Blessed and others on here who encourage one another, so that makes me so happy. And it builds a different evidence. It builds a different frame set, that gives us, it inspires us. That encouragement, it goes a long way. So I'm glad I hope you're able to receive that today, Captain USA. Everything is an emotional response. It can be. And when we have wounded children that live inside of us, that inner child, I talked about this the other week, is there can be emotional immaturity. And nobody wants to claim emotional immaturity, but you can't heal your inner child without it. And that's why people are like should on themselves, is I shouldn't think this way, because there's the adult self, but there's the wounded inner child sometimes. And so the wounded inner child thinks this always and this never happens, because the inner child has so much hope. So much hope. And maybe they weren't able to learn to communicate that hope, is all that I'm saying. And that's what I try to get on here to help people learn, is how to communicate. Because when we can communicate, we can negotiate rather than end up sacrificing ourselves for somebody else. And I'm not saying to always not sacrifice, because you have these human reflexes. We're going to do that when it comes down to it, if we needed to do that. But are we in overdrive with our central nervous system in that flight, fight, and freeze, strategizing, anticipating the next move all the time? And that's our central nervous system living in overdrive. And we're not enjoying the freedom of living this life. So healthy connections allow for autonomy. Codependency fears it. We fear that. We fear being seen, but at the same time, we want to be seen, right? So in healthy relationships, you can disagree without fear, say no without guilt, and have your own thoughts, feelings, and boundaries. In codependency, these things feel threatening, because somewhere inside there's a belief that if I'm fully myself, I might lose this connection, right? Is that we're afraid to say certain things. So we spend a lot of time in our mind thinking, do I say this or do I not say this? The deeper truth is that we just adjust to this. We just adjust to whatever they're doing, whatever their vibe feels like, without truly being alive in our own body and understanding our own vibe, because we're still coming from that protection mode, trying to protect the relationship, trying to protect ourselves. So we manage, we control what you can, and you keep everything ready and steady. You're always ready for everything and steady. And then we think nobody's there for me, right? This is what happens, is then we're like, nobody's ever there for me. I'm there for everybody else, but nobody's ever there for me, because you haven't got comfortable with your nose is all. There's nothing wrong with it. They're not there all the time. There would be nothing wrong if you weren't either. Because when we learn what realistic expectations and unrealistic expectations are, we're going to feel clearer in that and have more freedom, because that's what I had to learn, is I had some unrealistic expectations, and nobody wants to own that. But when I was hoping that the way I treated somebody else would return it to myself. And it did sometimes, but was I able to receive it? You know, was I able to think, okay, clearly this is where I'm supposed to be. This is the way that it is. I would be second guessing and questioning because that was something that my nervous system learned to do at an early age, at a young age. I learned to question everything and second guess because I got mixed messages from the outside that transmitted into the inside. So I didn't know, you know, but I would try to make things make sense that didn't make sense. And so I made up these stories as a little kid with the imagination. And then my imagination was catastrophizing. So I had to learn as an adult to change my imagination, to heal the catastrophes in my life, and to change then my imagination could change. There's no way around it but through it. So we control what we can, and we try to keep everything steady and ready. Not because you're trying to manipulate people in a harmful way, because you're not, but because you're trying to feel safe. That's it. Just trying to feel safe, trying to feel secure, just like me, you know? So in closing, we're about to close. So we're going to, start to shift this. When you begin to see that your identity has been built around maintaining connection, just not being abandoned, right? I don't want to be abandoned. So we run our lives trying to do everything we can not to be abandoned. Thank you, C. Hall. I appreciate you, Jason. I'm not going to say anything about that. Simply blessed. I agree about what you said about communicate and how it's so important. I had to learn to communicate and not manipulate because my communication was manipulation. I didn't know what I really wanted to say. I mean, I did, but I didn't know how to say it, if that makes sense. Immortal motivation is enabled by our emotions. It sure is, because I tell people, immortal beloved, is that our words are expressions of our thoughts, but our feelings are expressions of our body language and our actions. Exactly. And your feelings are directly connected to your emotions, Jason. All right. I'm not talking about that. Dawn, hello from me and Grinch. Immortal beloved, unrealistic expectations are thinking other people do what you want them to do. Yeah, our unrealistic expectations for me was that hoping that because I did this, they were going to do this, hoping that this was going to happen this weekend when I wanted to have fun over the weekend, but I was afraid to ask people, what are you doing this weekend? When I was hoping that someone would hold my hand instead of just holding their hand because I was afraid of being rejected. When I was hoping, so those are unrealistic expectations, but it's also where those unrealistic expectations provide proof of my low self-worth because I wasn't saying what I wanted, needed, and desired because we're afraid of being rejected. And that's part of our emotional maturity, is learning how to be rejected, because everybody gets rejected. Everybody does. So accepting our own humanness is what we can learn when we are able to look at these things. Because when we grew up, or when a partner had unrealistic expectations of us, when we were getting in trouble and we didn't know why we were getting in trouble, not only did we learn unearned guilt, we learned unrealistic expectations because we didn't expect to get in trouble, right? Any of y'all got in trouble and you didn't expect to get in trouble, and you feel like what you were doing was innocent, and then you got in trouble, and it's like, it knocks the wind out of you. And that's how it affects your nervous system, your respiratory system, your cardiovascular system, and your digestive system. All of that is linked to your anxiety, too. And I'm not, if you have anxiety that's chemically released, maybe that's some of it. I'm not a doctor, so there is, actual chemical releases that can cause you problems too. But sometimes it's just from that learned behavior of how we learned and accepted our identity, that self-image of ourselves. So we can change that. So when you begin to see your identity as being built about maintaining a connection, you can start asking a different question. Who am I without that? My therapist, life coach, she used to always tell me, what are you afraid of? When I would be afraid to say no, when I would be afraid of leaving a relationship that was gone past its expiration date. Should say, what are you afraid of? Immortal beloved. Yes, doing things for yourself are realistic. When I learned to use my big girl words and not trying to manipulate through the hints, through hoping, then I was able to use, then that was very empowering to use my big girl words, to be able to learn the dialogue. And I'm telling you what, I was in that coach's office and she would say, what could you have said instead? Because sometimes I said throwed off stuff, because a lot of people I work with in codependency are afraid of conflict and confrontation. That's why you may sacrifice. That's why you may compromise yourself. And so when I did that, my fairy goddess mother, life coach, she would say to me, what could you have said differently? And obviously, if I would have known what I could have said differently, I would have said it. And then she would make suggestions and I'd be like, oh yeah, that's it. So I would get my little notebook and paper and write down what she said so that I could imprint it, you know, because for me, writing things down helps to imprint things. I still write things down. You know, when I'm studying, I study a lot of things. And when I'm studying, I write it down, even though I don't have to. I could print it out, but I write a lot of things down because I want to remember. And I may not remember a day later, but when it comes time to remember, I remember. Y'all see Grinch's tail over there? Y'all that asked about the Grinch? Martin Motors, I can do one-on-one sessions. Please look in the description on this video or on any of the other videos. Look in the description and my email is in there. So if you'll contact me through my email, yes, I am open for one-on-one sessions and I would love the opportunity to get to meet with you. Thank you. So, Immortal Beloved, I study philosophy, psychology, neuroscience, and the Bible. That's amazing. I study a lot of that too. Dawn, hello. I always hear that, Stacy's mom. But do you know that other song says, they call me Stacy. They call me no, I forget the name. That's not my name. That's not my name. But Stacy Renee is my name. But yeah, at least I'm in another song besides Stacy's mom. My mom might be watching this. The numbers don't lie and they spell disaster. Okay, I don't know what that means. Jadeville, just scrolling. Thank you very much, Jason. You have a great day. Thank you. I don't know if you're still here, but Immortal Beloved, low self-worth is you're in your imagination. It's self-imposed. Yes, we're imagining the other way. Park Skyline, good morning, darling. How are you today? Dawn, it does my nervous system. I know your nervous system is shot to pieces. I hope that it gets better because sometimes we feel like it's never going to get better. But it does if we're willing. But we got to breathe, darling. We're about to get to the breathing part, okay? So hang in here. Some people don't realize your worth until you stop giving them what you give. Exactly. I like Lisa's Nichols, you know, and she always tells her grandmama stories. And she says, my grandmama says, and I'm not saying it exactly the way grandmama said it, and Lisa Nichols says it, but she says, if you want your yeses to mean something, you got to get comfortable with your no's. You know, because they'll treat you like a doormat. They will not value you if you don't say no sometimes. So they're not going to give, they're just going to keep taking. So, and that's not to manipulate. It's like for you to show up as you want to be. Like if I don't want to do something, if somebody says, Stacy, you want to go snorkeling? I'm like, no, I don't want to go snorkeling. I almost drowned when I was a kid. And so I don't like putting my face in the water in a mask. I could put my face in the water, but I don't like the claustrophobia of a mask. So, you know, where am I going? Where am I growing? When we understand we are constantly growing if we choose to. Again, it's about those choices. Am I going to grow or am I going to stay stuck? And you don't deserve to stay miserable. You weren't born to stay miserable. Life is an adventure. But until we learn that adventure to ourselves, that's the best adventure we're going to take, y'all. I promise. Because I took that adventure and I'm so grateful I took that adventure. Because life on life's terms is going to show up, and learning how to identify yourself is going to give you a strength that you don't even know that you have. It's going to give you a freedom that you didn't even know there ever was. For real. So where we're going next, we're going to have part 3 on Friday night of this codependency. If you weren't sure what codependency is and you're starting to learn what codependency is, Mr. Goddamn, it is good to see you. Hello. I hope you've gotten to catch a lot of this. If you didn't, it will come up in the replays, but probably not until tomorrow. It's called neuroimmunoendocrine system. Well, there's also the ganglia chains, immortal beloved, and a lot of people don't realize how the ganglia chains work. That in the back of our mind is the amygdala, right? And that's like our brain's garbage disposal, and that stuff we're supposed to let go of. But some of that stuff we tend to ruminate on when we claim a lot of things as our identity. So we have to let that identity go, that what we've claimed that doesn't serve us anymore. So that goes down the ganglia chains, where. But the ganglia chains are like your autonomic and your cerebrospinal chains. The autonomic is what your mind says. When you got to go to the bathroom, your mind just says, I'm going to get up, and your cerebrospinal knows to get up and go to the bathroom. Same is when people get triggers. So those those survival mechanisms can turn to tangible tools when we find harmony in between and learn the strengths that those survival mechanisms gave us and turn those to the tangible tools. But we have to let go of what no longer serves us and realize where our power is, because you do have power. It's just not over other people. We want to inspire other people, but I don't want power over anybody else. After years of binge controlled or work partners and relationships and totally lost who I am and who I was. I know, Dawn. I know. Jadeville gives you hugs. I give you hugs too. So big girl words is asking for what I want. Say so. If you're a single person and you want a monogamous relationship, just have that conversation before you invest time, rather than feeling like you are obligated to do something. So if somebody approaches me and they're like, want to date me or whatever, right from the get, I'm like, I only do monogamy. And then I make sure that that's what they're interested in. And if they're trying to, sometimes I have had attractive people, that are very interested in me, but they don't want a monogamous relationship. And so we can be friends, but they cannot date me. You know what I mean? Because I love myself and I'm going to take care of myself. I don't need to protect myself. I love myself. See, when you love yourself, you don't feel the need to protect yourself. You know how everything's going to play out according to your choices. See, that's what I know. So using my big girl words, Mr. Goddamn Facts, yes. Okay. Thank you, I'm Sahil. Sahil Stacy. Could you give us, okay. Simply Blessed. Thank you so much, Simply Blessed. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, Moonfletch, you're not being very nice. Done. See, that's what I love here. So many of y'all are so nice. Jadeville, boundaries are needed, but a struggle for me. Trying to set and stand with it. I give too much of myself trying to show people they have worth. And I know, I used to do it too, Jadeville. I know the struggle is real. Sometimes, Grinch is stealing my cough drops over here. Sometimes, you know how I tell people to start or suggest, don't tell people what to do, but I suggest to start learning to set boundaries is to say, I don't know, let me think about it. Doesn't that sound and look good and empowering? And I know some of you have been here before when I've told you how I worked with somebody else, and they were on TV and their family kept coming at them wanting money. And so they said, they keep wanting money, but I don't want to give, it's the same, they just didn't want to give them money anymore. But they didn't know how to say no. I said, well, if you can't say no, if you don't want to say no, I'm not doing that this time, then being able to say, I don't know, let me think about it. Let me think about it. And look in their eyes and say it with all the powers. She and I practiced, and at first when we practiced, she was like, I said, so go ahead and say it to me like I'm them. So she says, I don't know, let me think about it. And I'm like, well, let's look in my face when you say it, because they're not going to believe you. How many of us say when we try to set boundaries and we don't feel comfortable setting them and we look somewhere else, and then the people we say, they don't believe me, they never listened to me. That's because we didn't believe in ourselves, So when you make eye contact with somebody, that's believing in yourself. So then she did it again, and she said, I don't know, let me think about it. But, it sounded kind of robotic, and I'm like, this is what you did. You're doing great. You're doing better. But I don't know. Let me think about it. Then, do you see how our body language, like somebody else was saying earlier, our body language, I think it was Immortal Beloved, our body language is indicative of how we feel about ourselves. So if we look uncertain, they're going to see uncertainty. And not everybody does have your best interest at heart. They don't care. Grinch stole my cough drops. Look at this. He's got one open right here. So, yeah. Psychoneuroimmunology is the study of how depression and anxiety affect the system. There you go. Jadeville and Don, thank y'all so much for lifting each other up. Thank you, Don Colleen. Yep, you did hear a bird. You sure did. NG Mining. Christopher Hitchens. I will write that down. Christopher Hitchens. I think I've already seen him, but I'm going to write it down. All right. All right, Don. Good for you. It's very hard to find a loyal partner nowadays. Yes. Thank you, Woodtrill. My glove. Greetings. Congratulations. I'm glad I knew you'd found a job by now. So I'm so happy. Although there's a lot of people waiting on jobs for a long time too. So my thoughts are with you also. But thank you. Jadeville has a twin sister, 3 children that are all girls. My last partner had trauma before me, and I lost myself trying to show her. Yes, that's codependency too, Jadeville, because I used to do that too, is try to heal other people. And when I started looking at my patterns, I had to look at my patterns. And what I started to notice was that a lot of the people that I chose to have relationships with were right out of relationships and hadn't healed from those relationships. So I never really felt like they were mine anyway, because they hadn't done that healing work. So my soul's like, or whatever, I didn't feel like they were mine anyway. And of course they're not, because they're not here today, So I when I do choose relationships too, is it somebody who's done some work on themselves? Because I've done a lot of work on myself. So I'm not trying to fix anybody else. Thank you, NGD Mining. Don, my ex could never look at me in the eyes and never heard him laugh once, and he could only give a sarcastic, yes. Sarcasm covers up a lot of pain for people. A lot of the people I work with, say that they're sarcastic, and they acknowledge that it is to cover up pain, So when we're hurt, we're attracted to other hurt people, because sometimes we're trying to rescue other hurt people. Not everybody, but sometimes. I know I did that when I didn't heal from my relationship, so I would bounce, because part of the programming in me was, my mom I had an aunt who told my mom that the only way to get over a man is another man. So I used to bounce and think that I was just going to find the right one, but I didn't know what the right one, the qualities that the right one needed to have. So most of the time I chose ones that had addiction or alcoholic problems that I felt comfortable with, because I grew up in that. Or I connected to those that, didn't know who they were, because I didn't know who I was. So it was mirroring back to me in my relationships. Jadeville. Well, I hope you keep coming back to this channel and getting to learn yourself, because that is the best adventure. And you do have a purpose. You're even being here is serving a purpose, because you've already helped Dawn this morning, and y'all help each other and you support each other, because we get by with a little help from our friends. But it's hard sometimes to know who our real friends are when we're trying to do everything for them and we're not really thinking about ourselves, and we don't feel accepted. Grinch is in position for breathing. Are y'all ready to breathe? I hate to just stop here. Jadeville, come back Friday if you can, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don, it's always good to see you here. Modern day pirate. Yeah. Y'all are amazing. I love and appreciate you, and thank you for choosing to spend your time with me. I need a drink of water. I've been talking this morning. Everything's a sense of practice and development. You know, when I was a kid, I talk about returning to our childlike state. It's Wednesday. When we're little kids, we don't question our wins. We learn that even I try so hard and I still don't win something. So that's defeating sometimes. Aw. Well, I'm going to show you what tapping is. Grinch doesn't like tapping, so I don't know how well it's going to go. And it's going to look weird maybe at first, because when I first started it was weird to me. But the shooting on ourselves, because Jadeville, Dawn, do you ever should on yourself? Say, I should have done this, I should have done that, I should have said this, I should have said that. Tapping helps us to validate, because there's a part of us that is emotionally mature who's done great things to try to prove our worth to somebody else, to try to prove love to somebody else without providing that for ourselves. Then there's that inner child, because I know, Don, you grew up much like I did. And when you grow up in addiction and you don't really get to consider yourself as a child and you're just waiting for the other shoe to fall, you're just waiting for these things. That child still hasn't healed yet in many cases, you know, and it didn't for me. And I'm still healing that inner child. It's like that is imprinted, embedded, and ingrained within us, whether we want to think about it or not. We try to think that those things away. Defeated is the perfect word. I've been trying to figure out how to be a better me, and a better me is given to myself. Exactly, Jadeville. If you would like one-on-one sessions with me, like I said, my email is in the thing. But if not, just keep showing up, suiting up and showing up. You suit up and show up for everybody else. Suit up and show up for yourself, you know, because this inner child deserves your attention. Maybe as children, we didn't get that attention. Maybe our thoughts were dismissed and our feelings were discarded. So as adults, sometimes we tend to do that to ourselves in fear of losing love from somebody else, right? So that's where my big girl words came in handy, is where I was able to speak my truth. And that's what we talked about this morning on Facebook about the lies. Because a lot of times we feel like others tell us lies, but I think we all are just talking from what we think our truth is at the time. And some people are, like I said, they'll tell you lies, and we feel tricked. I had to learn for myself, and that sometimes I hurt my own feelings by the things that I thought and I didn't express, and those turned out to be unrealistic expectations. I'm glad you've been real nice, Moonflesh. Thank you. I hope that this was helpful to you and anyone else who's here. And if you consider this some valuable information and you want to learn more about yourself, cells, and soul so you can grow, please subscribe to this channel. And as always, if you have any ideas for topics, or you have any ideas, okay. Well, now you're getting a little silly, Moonflesh. So, then please feel free to reach out to me in the email in the description or in the comments, okay? So we're going to breathe. And what this breathing does is it helps you to regulate. If you were a child and you suffered childhood, trauma, disappointment, these kind of things, what happens is every time this happened, you went, and so our body gets used to doing that when we see things that remind us of that, when we have those fears, because those fears don't just heal themselves, darling. We don't just grow out of these fears. We have to work on healing them. We have to recognize that inner child's fears so that we can help the inner child heal, because nobody else is going to do it. They're not. So, empowering yourself. So breathing in, it will regulate you. You'll find peace right in this moment. I'm so glad it was helpful, and you are very welcome. And then what it does is it also regenerates your cells. That's what I mean, is that when we breathe this life force into our brain, our divine mind, we can think more clearly. And then also our cells, our cells love oxygen. So give your body some oxygen, give your body, mind, and soul some oxygen so you can grow. And I hope to see you Friday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time on here. Okay, so let's breathe, darling. We're only doing 5 breaths, 5, but I want you to hear those sounds that you usually don't hear when we've got this mind noise going on. The mind dysmorphia, right? We got the mind noise going on, those strategize and anticipate making things up. And if we just breathe, darling, that's what I had to learn to do, is just breathe. And then we're going to hold it for 4 counts if that's comfortable. But if that's not comfortable, just do the best you can and release gently and slowly out of your mouth. So we're going to regulate and regenerate. Okay? Here we grow. Here we grow. So take a deep breath in. All the way into your belly, shoulders up, your heart open, and your head up. Hold it. And release gently and slowly. Breathe in. Hold it. And release. Breathe in. Hold it. And release. Just 2 more. Breathe. Hold it. And release. Last one. Breathe in. Hold it. And release. Thank you again. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here this morning. Thank you, Jadeville. Thank you all so much for being here this morning. As I said, I do one-on-one coaching. My email is in the description. I also have a workshop coming up. It starts May 7th. It's called The Unbound Self. This is where we get to learn about how our neural pathways feed into our energy centers in our body and how we can be more in control of that, understanding our body and our mind and our soul relationship. You are very welcome, Jadeville. I hope I see you Friday night, okay? I love that y'all are my Friday night day, and I thank you so much. All right, Grinch says bye too. All right, y'all have a wonderful Wednesday. Remember, you're a winner. You've overcome things that at one time you thought were going to be hard and unbearable and defeated, and you grew past it, and you're going to grow past it. If you feel defeated right now, you're going to grow past that too. Okay? Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here. Much love and appreciation. Bye.